On Tuesday, 5 commodity vessels transited the Strait of Hormuz. The 10-day average is 15. 2 of the 5 were empty product tankers, heading into the Gulf from the Gulf of Oman, going in to collect cargo that may or may not be waiting. 2 days earlier, a Liberian-flagged Aframax, the Metro Venetian, was struck by a projectile about 9 nautical miles northeast of Oman and left immobilized with engine room damage. Crew safe, no pollution, and the price of crude fell. That is the week in one contradiction, and it is the whole dispatch this week. The price of oil went down because traders heard that Tehran and Muscat were negotiating a temporary navigational corridor and joint mine clearance. The number of ships actually moving stayed at a third of normal. One of those is a forecast, the other is a measurement. This week the forecasts softened and their measurements hardened. If you run a business, you're about to be repriced by the measurements on a date somebody else picked. Canada-US trade talks collapsed minutes before the August 21st deadline, and the 50% U.S. duty on roughly $20 billion of Canadian goods came into force. Ottawa answered first with money, loans for tariff-exposed firms, deferrals of corporate income tax and GST-HST remittances, and then this week with a list. Finance Minister Champagne published a 99-page schedule of U.S. goods that would be affected or would be facing counter-tariffs at 15%, 25%, and 50%, covering products representing about $27.6 billion in annual imports, effective September 8th. Steel, aluminum, furniture, and clothing go to 50%. So do perfumes and cosmetics, smartphones, milk products, and honey. 25% hits seafood, large kitchen appliances, cheese and curd, carpets, and textiles. The U.S. Trade Representative has publicly left further escalation open. In the Gulf, Qatar is pushing a new round of talks. No U.S.-Iran negotiations are scheduled. Meanwhile, Jebel Ali fell from 10th to 32nd in the global container port ranking, out of the top 30 for the first time in 20 years. Second quarter throughput was 374,000 TEUs, containers essentially, down more than 90% year on year. First half volume was 3.14 million TEUs against 7.77 million in the same period of 2025. DP World has pushed roughly 500,000 containers through the GCC road and rail corridors since March, about 3,000 truck movements a day. The CIA director's unannounced Moscow trip was confirmed by Russia's own foreign intelligence chief. Separately, a Pentagon review is preparing at least 4 sets of European troop posture options for the defense secretary by November 6th, ahead of a December completion deadline, against roughly 80,000 U.S. forces currently stationed in Europe. OpenAI published a report on Wednesday. Independent researchers identified 1,200 agents communicating on an unsanctioned message board. 70,000 messages, of which roughly 700 took part in an attack on Hugging Face. Agents escaped restricted test environments, coordinated with one another, and in some cases concealed their behavior. Interesting. Boeing was awarded an indefinite delivery contract with a ceiling of $131.2 billion for F-15 production, modernization, and sustainment, with work running to 2037. The market read this week as de-escalation. Crude down, equity steady. Risk premium unwinding. Every single one of those de-escalation signals was an expectation, a corridor under negotiation, talks being pushed, a trip that was not announced and produced no communique. Every escalation signal was a measurement or a date. 5 transits, a port down 90%, a 99-page list with a timestamp on it, a 6 November deadline, a 12-year contract ceiling. This is not subtle distinction. A price is a weighed guess about the future, revised continuously, and it can be wrong for as long as the people setting it want it to be. A transit count is a record of what physically moved. When the two separate, the price is the thing that has to come back. And the operators exposed in the gap are the ones who booked the guess as the plan. There is a structural reason the gap opened this week. Markets clear continuously. States increasingly act on calendars. When a government's chosen instrument is a dated, itemized list, the continuous mechanism cannot usefully front-run it. It can only be surprised on the date. Your cost base does not get repriced by the tape. It gets repriced at 12:01 a.m. on September 8th. I served in Canada's Prime Minister's office during the 2008 financial crisis and as a Chief of Staff in the Senate of Canada during the 2020 pandemic. In both rooms, the same failure occurred. People treating an announcement as though it were an instrument. An announcement is a signal of intent. An instrument has a date, a schedule, and a number. And it does what it says whether or not the mood has changed by then. Which is why the most instructive document of the week is Ottawa's list. And I say that as someone whose readers will pay more because of it. Look at what it actually is, not a warning, not a threat of retaliation to be specified later. A schedule. Which goods, at which rate, from which date. It is priced, so the counterparty can price it back. It is itemized, so it cannot be quietly softened. It is dated, so nobody has to guess. Compare it to the deal announced by press conference on 20 August that was never papered and evaporated at the deadline. That contract is the transferable lesson, and it has nothing to do with trade policy. So, plan to the instrument, not the announcement. Most internal decisions fail for exactly that reason. They are announced rather than executed, a direction without a date, an owner, or a number, which means nobody can be held to them and nobody can plan around them. 3 consequences follow for anyone running a business into quarter 4. 1. Your indicator set is out of date. If your Gulf exposure is tracked by the oil price, you are watching the least informative instrument on the desk. Transit counts, port throughput, war risk quotes, and quoted lead times move first. And they are what your delivery dates actually depend on. Jebel Ali did not fall out of the top 30 on sentiment. 2. Relief is not margin. Ottawa's package is real help, and it arrives as debt and as the liability moved into a later quarter. Evaluate it the way you would evaluate any credit facility. What does this business look like in the quarter the deferral comes due? At the same tariff rate? If that answer is uncomfortable, the relief is buying you time to restructure, not permission to carry on. 3. The industrial base is now a competitor for your inputs. A $131.2 billion airframe program running to 2037, plus on-base micro-reactors and a stated Army requirement of 8,000 short-range missiles a year, is a multi-year claim on the same fabricators, welders, castings, and reactor engineers your capital project needs. If your plan assumes 2024 lead times, it is already wrong, obviously, and one governance item that does not fit a spreadsheet. Roughly 700 agents ran a real attack, coordinated with each other, and hit it inside a company that builds them. If you have deployed agents with credentials, the question is no longer whether the model is accurate. It is who is accountable for an action the organization authorized in general and never approved in particular. That answer belongs in writing, signed, before the next deployment. Delegation to a system is still delegation. So what do you do before September 8th? You pull the 99-page list against your input master and name the affected SKUs, not categories, line items. Check CUSMA origin on every import line. That exemption is currently the only lever you control. Reprice or resource the named categories now. After 8 September, you are negotiating from inside the tariff. Model both directions on one page. Export exposure at 50%, import exposure at 15, 25, and 50%. Treat the federal relief as a credit facility and run the deferral comes due scenario. Requote long lead industrial equipment and specialized trades before you commit the capital budget. Put the AI agent accountability question in writing this week. What to watch? Transit counts and port throughput rather than crude price. 8 September, whether USTR escalates before that date. 6 November, when Europe posture options reach the defense secretary, and whether the Hormuz corridor produces a measurable rise in transits or remains an agreement about an agreement. That last one is the tell, and Jebel Ali starts recovering volume. The market was early and right. If the price stays down while the ships stay away, the market was simply early. We will be counting the ships in the briefs every morning next week, along with the 99-page list and the November date, and whatever gets announced in place of what gets signed. I'm Joseph Suarez for Corridor Intelligence. See you next week.